There is a famous phrase often attributed to Mark Twain: history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. If you believe the economic crises we face are merely random occurrences, bad luck, or the result of simple political incompetence, you are operating with a severe blind spot. What if the macro cycles we experience aren't history accidentally rhyming? What if they are the systematic execution of a repeating playbook designed by a managerial elite? Today, we are stripping away the mainstream narrative. We are going to look at the striking, undeniable parallels between the modern globalist push, epitomized by the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and Agenda 2030, and the massive structural consolidation that occurred exactly 1 century ago during the 1920s and 1930s. Most people look at the Great Depression as a historical tragedy. By the end of this module, you will see it for what it actually was: a highly successful masterclass in asset confiscation, institutional centralization, and mass subjugation. And more importantly, you will see exactly how that same blueprint is being deployed right now. The 1920s blueprint, the precursors to Agenda 2030. Let's step back to the 1920s. The Roaring Twenties are remembered for jazz, flappers, and soaring stock markets. But behind the scenes, an intellectual and institutional framework was being built that mirrors today's World Economic Forum with terrifying precision. In the 1920s, the Agenda 2030 of the day was split into two primary movements: the League of Nations and the Technocracy movement. First, let's talk about the League of Nations. Born out of the ashes of World War I, it was marketed to the public as the ultimate solution to global conflict, a benign body to ensure world peace. But beneath the humanitarian rhetoric, it was the first concrete attempt to establish a global administrative state. It was designed to erode national sovereignty and subordinate local economic policy to an international body of planners and central bankers who had just established the Federal Reserve System in 1913. But the real architectural twin to the Great Reset was a movement called Technocracy Incorporated, led by an engineer named Howard Scott at Columbia University. The technocrats argued that traditional politics and the price system, what you and I call free market capitalism and money, were entirely obsolete. They asserted that because the industrial world had become so complex, society could no longer be left to the chaotic choices of the individual or the free market. Sound familiar? It should. It is the exact same narrative used today by advocates of stakeholder capitalism and ESG metrics. The technocrats proposed a complete societal overhaul. They wanted to replace elected politicians with an unelected managerial elite composed of engineers, scientists, and bureaucrats. They openly advocated for the elimination of private property and private business, stating that all production and distribution should be centrally optimized by the state. They even designed a replacement for physical currency. Today, AI is their replacement for managerial elites. Energy certificates versus CBDCs, the ultimate tracking tool. Look closely at what the technocrats designed in the late 1920s. This is an energy certificate. Because they wanted to eliminate the price system, they proposed that every citizen would be allocated a specific allotment of energy units calculated by the elite planners based on total continental production. But this wasn't just money. The energy certificate was designed to track everything. It recorded exactly who you were, what item you purchased, where you purchased it, and when. It was a closed loop, completely trackable, programmable medium of exchange. If you did not conform to the technate's industrial directives, your certificates could be modified or restricted. Now, let's draw the parallel to current events. What is the modern equivalent to the energy certificate? It's the Central Bank Digital Currency, or CBDC, combined with individual carbon footprint trackers. When the World Economic Forum talks about a transition away from physical cash toward a digitized, centralized banking ledger, they are running Howard Scott's 1920s playbook line for line. A CBDC is not just digital money. We already have digital money. A CBDC is a programmable tool of compliance. It allows the centralized authority to track every transaction, implement negative interest rates directly onto your balance sheet, and cap your spending based on arbitrary social or environmental scores. The technocrats called it scientific resource management. The WEF calls it sustainable development. It is the exact same operating system. They've simply updated the user interface, the 1929 crash, and the confiscation playbook. How do you convince a fiercely independent population to accept this level of subjugation and central control? You don't ask them. You create a crisis so severe that they beg for it. During the 1920s, the financial elites promoted what they called the New Era economy. Prominent economists, including Irving Fisher, declared that the markets had reached a permanent plateau of prosperity. The masses were encouraged to take on massive amounts of debt, using easy credit to buy into the booming stock market and expanding real estate. This was the setup. In October 1929, The bubble was intentionally or systematically popped through a sudden and severe contraction of liquidity by the Federal Reserve System. The resulting crash didn't just wipe out paper wealth, it triggered a massive, decades-long wave of real asset foreclosure. Millions of families lost their homes, farms, and businesses to a highly concentrated group of major banking institutions. This brings us to the most flagrant act of mass economic confiscation in American history. Executive Order 6102. On April 5, 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 62. Under the guise of a national banking emergency, the federal government criminalized the private ownership of gold. Think about the sheer audacity of this move. American citizens were ordered under penalty of a $10,000 fine, which was a fortune at the time, or 10 years in prison, to march into a Federal Reserve Bank and hand over their hard foundational wealth in exchange for depreciating paper currency. Immediately after the gold was confiscated, the government devalued the dollar by altering the gold price from $20.67 to $35 per ounce. They stripped the population of their wealth, devalued what little they had left, and centralized the entire golden foundation of the monetary system into the hands of an unelected central banking cartel. Compare this to the modern narrative popularized by the WEF: you will own nothing and you will be happy. The playbook doesn't change. First, you expand credit to encourage mass leverage and debt. Second, you contract the system to trigger a widespread default. Third, you swoop in under the banner of an emergency to execute mass asset confiscation. The rise of the administrative state, mirroring the technate. Once the wealth was consolidated, the political machinery moved in to cement the subjugation. This was achieved through the creation of the alphabet agencies, the birth of the modern administrative state. Roosevelt bypassed traditional constitutional legislative processes by utilizing a group of academic advisors known as the Brain Trust. Men like Rexford Tugwell openly admitted their disdain for individual liberty and the free market. They believed that individual sovereignty belonged to the past. To implement their vision, they created an explosion of unelected bureaucratic agencies. The National Recovery Administration, NRA, which forced private industries to adhere to strict government-dictated codes, eliminating the competitive edge of small businesses. The Agricultural Adjustment Act, AAA, which took direct control over food production, literally paying farmers to destroy crops while bread lines stretched around city blocks. The Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, a massive multi-state resource mapping and infrastructure project that completely bypassed local elected officials. These agencies combined legislative, executive, and judicial powers into single, unelected bodies. They could write a regulation, enforce that regulation, and prosecute you for violating it, completely cutting out Congress and your right to a trial by jury. This is the exact institutional mirroring of the modern Great Reset. Today, we see power shifting away from local, elected representatives toward unelected globalist administrative bodies, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, global central banking committees, and domestic regulatory agencies that enforce ESG mandates without a single vote ever being cast by the public. Architecting your sovereign OS. So, why does this matter to you? It matters because if you understand that this is a repeating playbook, you stop reacting to headlines and you start anticipating structural shifts. The 1930s taught us that when the macro system resets, the unprotected middle class and small business sectors are intentionally hollowed out to facilitate consolidation for the elite. Edward Bernays, the father of modern propaganda, wrote explicitly in his 1928 book, Propaganda, "Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government which is the true ruling power of our country. They told us their philosophy 100 years ago. They are telling it to us again today. Your job is to build an alternative operating system. You must avoid the structural traps that neutralized the business owners of the 1930s. This means eliminating reliance on fragile banking counterparty risk, maintaining true asset sovereignty, controlling your own supply chains, and building a business that operates outside the compliance parameters of the developing technocracy. History doesn't have to claim your business as a casualty of its rhythm. By recognizing the playbook, you gain the ultimate unfair advantage. Foresight, stay sovereign. I'll see you in the next module.